Hey everybody, it's Brian Nutter at Summit Racing here. Would like to say thank you for joining us here at noon Eastern Standard Time for our Friday live stream that we often do. With us today, we've got some great folks, and it's pretty cool. We have a very wide variety of people we bring in. Sometimes it's racers, sometimes it's builders, and this time is the very first time that we've got these two fellas that are with us that have done something completely unique that we've never covered before. So we've got John Ryan. He's basically known as Pro Stock John, and he's one of the two founders of LS1 Tech. And then we've got Lonnie Grim, and he is the tech director extraordinaire of many a serious racing event, LS Fest. I'm going to let him cover a bunch of those. But as we do with these live streams, something I'd encourage you to do is go ahead and pop into the comments, tell us what your name is, where you're from. If you have comments, we're going to go ahead and try to address those. And sometimes they come in real fast and we're not able to cover them right away, but we're going to try to cover them before the end of our segment. I can kind of scroll up and down and I can send those off to John or Lonnie, as we can do it. And then if we don't get to your question, we'll all three of us try to get in there afterwards and, try to address your question or, give you as many answers as we can. But these guys have a super wide variety of experiences, so really looking forward to this gig that we've got going here today. I would also like to say thank you to our team here in the studio, Patrick and Katie, and of course David and co that help us do this thing here every once in a while. So John, we've known each other for a long time now. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. You want to give yourself an introduction and kind of how you got into this thing.
Yeah, and I think we first met, I think I was 10 because I'm now 35.
Right.
Big liar, big liar. I think, when Tony and I started LS1 Tech, we just had this desire to have a cool place to hang out and talk about performance. And we set up the forum in 2001 in the fall. And it just took off like crazy. But again, part of the grand design was we wanted to have a great place that had a great hosting infrastructure that wouldn't freeze and lag, which most forums did in 97 to 2001. So we set it up and we hung out and in some respects, we didn't actually really even like each other. Because back in the day, you had these rivalries. So
right.
The forums just basically let us sit there and beat our chests and compete with each other on a national scale. So you had the Houston Six, you had the Chicago people, you had the Louisiana people, you had the New Jersey people,
right.
Detroit people, and we were all going after these little records and working on our combos, quietly blowing up our cars but not towing people. So that was kind of our start. And the forum went from 2 people, 2 members to 94,000 at when we sold it. So yeah, just an amazing time.
That's pretty interesting because I kind of found myself on there, and I guess I'll basically just phrase it this way: I'm not an early adopter of technology. I was one of the last people onto Facebook, probably, although I'm sure we've got some others that are with me there. Things like Snapchat and Instagram and all that stuff. Yeah, not really. I guess I might have an account there. I don't even know. My kid probably runs it. But at any rate, finding LS1 Tech was pretty interesting because you have experts that may or may not be experts, people that actually race and do things and don't want to talk about it, and you have people that regurgitate just what they've heard from this guy or that. And I guess you just have to kind of learn those. But there's a lot of good stuff. And then also, that ubiquitous search function of people being able to go in and they want to search this term or that term and try to find information. We really found that people, all over the country and really all over the world could go in there and see what other people had done, to solve a problem. And I would say that forums were one of the first places nationally, or really at any time, where we saw this acceleration of technology and knowledge just with the advent of the computer basically do the same thing for racing, where it's been going straight up. And I think about how fast we're going now and doing it without blowing up with relatively inexpensive parts. And I know that the forums have been a big part of that, and now that's moved into some of the Facebook user groups like Sloppy Mechanics, our friends there, Boosted LSX. I mean, John, can you tell us a little bit more about some of those user groups you're on now, and kind of where you see things going?
Yeah, well, I mean, pre-internet, we had these cars, and we would go to the counter guy at our local speed shop, right, Lonnie? Or actually, Lonnie probably knew more experienced people, so he talked to the better people. But I'd be the guy talking to Steve at Super Shops and saying, yeah, I've got this small block Chevelle here with 327. It's got a small cam. Should I put a 750 double pumper on it or no?
Right.
And
that was also before the days of chassis dynos and things.
Yeah, and then the internet got going, and there were quickly a couple of forums going, and we were really about the third forum. I thought that was pretty serious about the LS stuff in general. CamaroZ28.com with Chris Friends and Jason Debler. That was the very first forum I went on, and it was very well organized. It was a really kind of a model. But yeah, we were doing the forum thing from back from 1967 to 74. But no, I mean, we were doing it from 01 through 2007 would be probably the kind of the peak years.
Yeah.
And Facebook became the new platform, and like you said, I mean, we hang out in a lot of groups. Boosted LSX, Sloppy Mechanics. There were still a couple of forums kicking around. I'm certainly on tech still every day. So getting our information from and sharing information across those things. We're not really on the Twitter, I don't think. So, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't do TikTok and Snapchat. I got better things to do. So.
Yeah, don't want to see a lot of my friends on TikTok doing what they do on TikTok, which brings us to Lonnie. Lonnie, we've been kind of in the same industry now for a long time, and I've done different things for the industry, and you have as well. Can you give us a little bit about how you got into it? I mean, you're a professional, you have a dream job. For a lot of our fans and customers here that are watching us today, can you give us a little idea of your pathway? What you were doing in high school, and then what happened next?
So my family was a car family. And so my dad, not much of a fabricator himself, but had a business that could afford to have people do things or whatever. As I grew into, from about 10 years old, their construction company, I started welding back in the shop, and the guys back there kind of took me under a wing and would show me, learn wrenches and how to work on things and how to tear stuff apart and how to put it back together. And I was really good at tearing it apart. And so nonetheless, that's at a really young age. I was kind of thrown into the mechanical side, the welding and fabrication side of things. And so from there, it grew. Everything along the way that I wanted to know, my family's business was of such that it could afford me to go learn. Mm-hmm. So I ended up in the street rod business, building street rods for almost 20 years. Okay. Somebody said, what happened to that? And I go, it never got advertised as 20-year, very successful, all in-house, 100% from start to finish, paint, upholstery, everything. And along the way, I wanted to know how to build a 34 Ford fender out of a flat piece of metal on an English wheel. So I'm 16 years old. School's finished for the summer. I'm out of school. I know a guy in Oklahoma City that's the sheet metal guy at Tinker Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And name's Dan Mikey. I called Dan, make some arrangements to go live with him for the next 9-10 weeks. And I learned how to use an English wheel, a panishing hammer, a sandbag, and so my family's business afforded me a lot of opportunity to learn. Mm-hmm. And so 20 years of street rod stuff and dibble around in a few hot rod cars and a little street race, this and that, finally end up with a real race car and going to the racetrack. And somebody said, again, how did you get out of the street rod business? I quit going to the street rod nationals and started going to the U.S. Nationals.
Got
And
it.
so really over a conversation at dinner, somebody having some electrical problems, and I don't know them, they don't know me, but I'm listening to the conversation, and I step into the conversation. I go, hey, you might need to check or change the master disconnect switch. We've ran across that in the past. And so again, this business that I have now, and really it's become off seasonal for outside the event season.
Mhm.
I build race cars. And I still work on everything, a little street rod here and there, but yeah, mostly hardcore race car stuff, and time permitting. We have the ability to build a ground up constructed from tubing to finished product, but I don't have the time. So nonetheless, I still very much enjoy the fabrication end of it. And that's from where I was to where I am. There's a whole lot of story in between, but that's really how I got started and where I'm at today.
Well, so right here before we started filming the segment, or whatever you want to call it, folks, Lonnie and I were talking about he was in college and all that stuff, and then he ended up getting into NASCAR. You want to give us, basically tell that story, how you just kind of, I'm not going to say wandered into it, because that's not really how it worked, but how you found yourself doing that kind of as a stepping stone.
So again, part of that opportunity that existed when I was younger, this would have been 1991, 1991, and I had opportunity to meet Steve Schmidt and Jerry Haas and Jerry Bickle, and all have become really lifelong friends and mentors through the whole process. But those guys liked me and kind of took me under a wing and provided opportunity. One of those opportunities was getting involved with different pro stock teams, and from suspension setups to clutch stuff to cutting the clutch to just put the transmission back in, running the valves, check the motor, whatever the case was. I got very well versed in being able to be an assistance to a number of different pro stock teams. Jerry Haas would call me with a brand new, a guy bought a brand new car. They barely know how to get the projects out of the cardboard box. Can I meet them at St. Louis, make the test runs? They're on Smith power. They got 710 power. So if you can make a run somewhere in 710, 709, that's the best you're going to find. So nonetheless, to hurry that story forward, I was working for Larry Nance on the Catch 22 car in Seattle, Washington. And we were at Seattle and Northwest national event for NHRA. And a guy kept hanging around the pit, just asking questions, this, that, what's this, what's that, introduced himself. He was from Colorado Springs. I remembered the conversation. He handed me a card before the end of the weekend. He goes, could I call you next week or week after? I said, sure. So he calls up and goes into telling me all about his NASCAR stuff and truck and ARCA and Winston West and their big plan. And he's in Colorado Springs and wondered if I could fly out, sit down and visit. There may be an opportunity. I'm thinking that, I'm going out to check. I'm gonna carry the gas can. I was a pretty burly guy, played high school and college football, and so maybe I'm the right rear tire changer, the jack man, the whatever. So anyway, but there's an opportunity to talk to. So I go out there. We sat down, we visit, we go through a whole day's worth of, call it an interview.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, he says, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." I said, one question I really do have is, what is it that I'm going to be doing? We've looked at the shop, the jigs, the engine, the dyno, the this, the that, and am I the gas guy, the jack guy, the tire guy, the broom pusher, the whatever? He goes, no. He looked at me really odd, kind of glassy-eyed, deer in the headlight deal, and he goes, "You're the crew chief." I said, "I'm the what?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You have the right personality to fill that position. You come with the right knowledge to be able to get the job done, jump in, actually put the engine together, build the rear end, whatever the case may be. And we want to hire you as a crew chief. We need 13 other guys to make this happen." And so that's where that started. And my very first event, I thought I was Kenny Rogers' six-pack movie when we rolled into the Phoenix 400
Right.
with a new team, with bowling shirts. This was 4 subliminal shirts, and we had some nice bowling shirts with our team name on, and a beautiful car, and we went to the Phoenix 400 was our very first event, and I showed up with a there in NASCAR you actually have a license. It's $400 at that time.
Yeah.
It's $400 to be a NASCAR crew chief, and I still have the card, Winston West NASCAR crew.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was very cool. That thing was about 18 months long. It was 2 seasons worth, and it ended up the money did not transpire to be able to continue at that level with that team,
Mhm.
and left there. And a guy named Mike Vellotti was, I call him the Bill France of the West Coast, and so he ran all the Winston West stuff. And I got to be really close friends with the tech group within NASCAR. And the deal was the very first race I showed up, I knew the rule book or where to find the information from page 1 to page 200. And they were trying to treat us as rookies, and your engine height, your spoiler, your wing angle, your body template, nothing would work. Well,
Right.
I would tell them on page 48, section B, subparagraph 3, it says, and so that's how I met the tech group over there. They called after all that was over in spring of '96 and offered me a position to come be involved with NASCAR Tech. At the same time, I had opportunity to go do what my real passion and real love was to go drag racing full time.
Yeah.
And 1997 it came out, and 97, 98 came out with Edmund Richardson on a super comp, stock eliminator, super gas, and a super stock deal. And we teamed up together. Mark Horton was doing a summit deal at that time.
Yep.
And guy Jason Lynch, another great friend, long-term friend, had moved over with Mark Horton to do the summit thing with you guys, and left a position open with Edmund, and we worked out a deal, and Borg Warner was our sponsor. And so that was where the very first NHRA event that I sat in the seat. And I'm sure some people within NHRA are like, oh, I remember that. I showed up at the inaugural Vegas national event. Another lady that became a really close friend, Polly Zimmerman, was the lady that checked you in registration. And she says, what's your name? I told her. And she was kind of rough and gruff till you got to know her.
Right.
And just doing a job. And so I gave her my name. She had a Rolodex. And so she flipped through the index cards. That was long before internet and laptops and all that. And so she pulls this card out, and it's just got my name on it and no other information. And she goes, what's your grade point? I looked at her. I said, ma'am, is that a trick question? She goes, how many races have you ran before? This is my first. She goes, we're at grade 6 or so for this event. It's an inaugural event, and you've not run anything?
Right.
No, ma'am. So nonetheless, some other sponsors got involved. Eventually, somebody came and whispered in her ear that it would be okay. And nonetheless, my very first trip down the racetrack was an inaugural Vegas national event, and it was and so that the NHRA career started there. A couple years go by, and I've got my own stuff, my own motorhome and trailer, and that's a long ways from a Cummins diesel and an open trailer and a couple quarts of oil to get to the racetrack.
Right.
And so every time I'd stop and get fuel in this new motorhome and T&E stacker and all that, I'd just walk around it and laugh. Just very humble, very proud, and took very good care of my stuff. Did very well. Have a number of Wallies on the mantle.
Yeah.
And over a period of years, had a lot of great times, met a lot of great friends, and that's really where that started. 2007. John will remember this. 2007, I got invited to come do some electronics checks. So I'm a big wiring guy. So a lot of what I wire a lot of race cars. And so I was pretty proficient in anything that would be, hadn't seen everything, but had seen most of it.
Right.
So nonetheless, 2007, NMCA called, says, hey, we're going to do an event in Memphis. We've got a car that's been running, I think 1150 everywhere in the country, an EFI class car. We don't believe that you can do that. And so from all sorts of DAs and weather. And so we want to have it checked. So I went with intention of really, that was my priority. Well, I end up falling into the staff there. We have, that's one of our first years for LS was in Memphis that year. And so I kind of ramrodded or was the director for that portion of the event. We did find something in the car in question that weekend, and he said it was an alarm. I told him that the rest of the weekend without this alarm box in the car, and magically it never went 1150 again. But nonetheless,
That's awesome.
so that's where the LS platform started. It was 2007, Memphis, and it took off and grew at a crazy pace from that point forward, and was blessed to be involved as the racing, full-time racing slowed down because the event procurement picked up. So I got invited to work more events, and now that event number is up to almost 40 a year.
Wow. So one of the cool things I find, there's many great things about that story, but one of the things our customers and fans that are listening to us today is, being 16 years old and working metal and just having that knowledge and that drive to go learn something. They said the same thing about Howard Hughes, is when he wanted to learn something, he'd go ahead and get dressed up as a factory worker and he'd go work somewhere very nondescript, and he would actually go, learn, firsthand working at these factories. Even with all of his wealth and everything, he wanted to learn how to do something just like everybody else. He'd go in there and learn it, and then he'd take it back and he'd work it into, everything else he was doing. And in a weird way, you're kind of doing the same thing there with what you're doing, in terms of you got the knowledge, and then you can see other people applying it, and you can see people twisting it and pushing those boundaries a little bit, but you can identify it because that's, you went out there and that's where you started. And a lot of our fans, like I said, we got 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds trying to build their cars here, and great lesson here that you can get from Lonnie. And that takes me into, we've heard from both of you guys now a little bit, and I want to talk about this intersection when you guys first started working together and did the LS1 Tech drag race event. How did that, that was fairly early on too. Can you guys, tell me a little bit about how that worked?
Well,
Here's the pup.
I obviously have a dog. So but only one. It's a lot of energy for 9 years old. So actually, just to kind of bring us to kind of like the John knows Lonnie now. We actually going back to 2000, GM High Tech magazine. Brian, do you remember Johnny Hunkins?
Absolutely.
So Johnny Hunkins, super great dude, organizes a shootout, some Bristol Bash or something he called it. It wasn't Buicks at Bristol because it was LS and LT, but he organized a race in 2000, which crazy enough was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And he put the word out across the forums and said, "Hey, we're going to do a race here. I welcome LS and LT cars, LT1 cars to come out and do battle." And I was part of the Chicago caravan. So there were 25 of us driving as a group from Chicago. I drove there on skinnies because I'm not the smartest, marble or whatever in the bag. Because I did get a flat. So I guess ET fronts were not a good idea. But we went to Bristol Bash. We ended up racing with people from Pennsylvania, New York, Texas, Louisiana. A lot of us had never actually run in a heads-up racing event before, so we just sat there and had a lot of fun. Carry forward, 2001, Johnny Hunkins said, "There's no way I'm ever doing that again." And Chris Endress, who worked for GM High Tech, and I put together a one-off race at Bowling Green in the fall of 2001, and we got a bunch of folks out, and that forced us to come up with some rules and things. And then later, Tony and I started LS1 Tech, and in 2003, we kicked off what ended up being a 3-year race series, the LS1 Tech series. We actually had Brian Madman Lonnie as the tech director. And that was a terrible idea. He is just a big personality. So I think at one point we had to like wrap duct tape around him and leave him in a trash can or something. This is too much.
Right.
But we did the series for a couple of years, and then NMCA got the Chevy Performance Challenge Series going in '07. And Lonnie, I think you and I first met that year.
That's right.
Memphis,
That's right? Yeah, it is. Memphis,
I think
October.
we met virtually before.
No, that's right. The forum-wise, talk on the phone or whatever the case was. And so I knew John as Pro Stock John, and was very involved in the LS world of things going on right then. And like I said, that was the early days. It was a small group, but a small group of guys that were really trying to parlay or kick the ball out, hit the ball out of the park for a very small group. And so we knew who each other was before we met face to face. But yeah, Memphis '07, October, and I remember it well.
That is awesome. So this is interesting because there's a couple things. You talk about the Chicago group, and of course, nobody's, everybody talks about how fast their group is and how slow everybody else is. But this is the time where you're like, okay, everybody better bring it. And there's a lot of big personalities that never showed up to the race, and after that, they kind of quiet after that. And it's kind of interesting to see that happen. So they were big on the forums, didn't show up to the race, didn't perform as they said they did. So everything kind of worked itself out in the wash there. The other thing that you're bringing up, and you're reminding me of a time that we're kind of entering now in a little bit of a way. So we had LT1, which was, there were some pretty quick cars at the time. It's a small block Chevy, but it's modernized. It's its own 4-year baby. And initially, when LS came out, the cars were not that quick, and the LT guys were, bashing on LS1s for being goofy and slow and all that stuff. And in a weird way, I'm starting to see the same thing with Gen 4 guys bashing on Gen 5 guys. And I'm wondering how long it's going to take, before Gen 5 kind of starts, overtaking there a little bit. But Lonnie, you brought something up, and I'm going to get into this next. When you said you had guys really, pushing it, to get it, push these things out of the park, there were a lot of people that bought these cars, back in 97, 98, 99, and they started going faster with them and really pushing. And these were EFI people. They may not have been carbureted people where you and I came, from the days of carburation, and then they're starting to introduce their technology, their EFI, supercharging nitrous and on into turbo, which we're going to get into a little bit later. But you were there coaching a lot of people and keeping them going straight down the track, not hurting themselves. Can you tell me about what that was like to come from a really high level professional NHRA background and then to watch these guys going really, really fast, which was with cars that are little more than street cars with a whole lot of power in them that, they're just really learning how to get down the track.
Then it was, I hear that echo again. Then was a situation where we, again, small group of guys that are hitting that thing out of the park, even a smaller group of guys that are really exceeding ET levels. Now, we're talking about a time just a year before NHRA kind of opens the door to the 2008 and newer vehicle to allow it to go quicker. And so this is how fast that ball was rolling. 2007, again, small group of guys that, they've got a street car over there that really, before no prep and no time and all that, they knew it was fast. They just didn't know how fast. And so we still have guys today that are involved in the LS stuff, especially True Street guys that were there in 2007 with a car that was really kind of outlawish, or it was built for speed, man. And they didn't quite understand all the rest of the safety rules that needed to go along with that. And so 2007, 1150 was where we had to start those conversations. If you went 1150 or quicker, obviously it was roll bar, roll cage.
Yeah.
Started suiting up because of your power adder and whatever fuel you're on at that point.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of conversation, but it was at the end of the year. And so 2008 really opened the door. NHRA saw what was fixing to take place and made that move for 2008 and newer cars to be able to go 10 flat. And you still couldn't do it in flip flops and shorts, but you at least you didn't have to send the car to the chassis shop and start working on the car in a bunch of ways to be able to get to that ET level.
Yeah.
So that made some things a lot nicer for, again, a very short time, because by 2011, man, every true street car out there can really exceed 10 flat. If it's a serious build, got a drag radial tire on it, it's got a tune, some aftermarket stuff, that thing will go faster than 10 flat. And so then it kind of comes back into play where you got to have, I call them educational conversations. And that's the politically correct way to say it. But yeah, so the one thing that's always been nice for me is that whether it be a brand new driver with a brand new build coming to the racetrack, and I can show them from burnout to pre-stage to stage to get to the end of the racetrack, turn off. There is a turn off down there. It is turn right or turn left. You're going to come back, get your ET slip. We've even had a guy that eventually won himself a NMCA championship. I started with him in Memphis, 2007, in a rental car. I put him in my rental car and showed him, this is when I say, hey, you need to go to the staging lanes. This is the staging lanes.
Right.
This is pre-stage. This is the water box. This is pre-stage. This is stage. We drove down the racetrack. This is the finish line. You can let go of the throttle there, find you a little brake pedal. This is your turn off. This is where they'll give you a sheet of paper, tells you what your performance was. We call it the ET slip.
Right.
That guy, 2018, became an NMCA champion.
No kidding.
And hundreds of racers between him and now as well. And so from then to now, I really find pride in helping people learn how to race, learn how to enjoy their efforts and what they did, and and then educate on what's the next level that your car needs to move to if you want to move beyond the level that you're racing.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you're bringing up some points because Chevrolet performance. We think about General Motors and everything, and the pace that they move. Some people think it's glacial. I see them actually moving pretty quick in some areas. You guys want to talk about LS1 Tech? How that was all kind of coming in around this time, and what that was. I think about it, how that brought people from all over the nation together to go race together with these classes. And you want to weigh in on that?
Just a quick comment about that. So, Tony and I did the LS1 Tech Racing Series from 03 to 06. We usually had 3 races per year, had points. Again, had to work with racers to come up with rules that would kind of balance kind of having a fair class with getting racer participation.
Right.
So it's kind of like you have to play music that's popular, otherwise nobody wants to come and see your band. So, I was going to say that I actually told James Lawrence when he was still with NMCA. I told him at PRI in 06 that Tony and I were going to hang up the racing series and stop doing that just because it was such a big time commitment. And Tony and I were juggling regular jobs and the forum. Mm-hmm. And I told him I wanted to work out something with them, and they didn't contact me, but then they did contact me 8 months later and say, hey, we're going to kick this thing off. So somewhere in there, if we could get James Lawrence to go on record, there's a little bit of because I said, I want to sell it to you for $1. So just to see it keep going. So there was a little bit of there was some kind of intersection there around stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've never really known the story about that, but it was a pretty cool time, and that kind of brings me into setting up these rules. I mean, it's I was involved with the LS Fest basically that first year, trying to set up rules, and I'm not really very good at it. It turns out I was remarking with John earlier. It's a little bit like playing chess with yourself. It's like, well, what would I do to get around this rule? So I'm going to put a rule there against it. And then if I do that, what am I going to do next? And you just end up rounding yourself into this little circle. And you eventually inhibit anybody from ever showing up to the racetrack and being able to run, because you've set the class up to be so tight. Lonnie, can you weigh in on that in terms of, what it's like trying to build these classes to, maximize participation and let people, hopefully people haven't overbuilt so that they can actually take maybe a few parts off their cars to compete. How is it trying to catch that timing where, people can add a few parts or subtract and run, versus people that have just completely blown through a set of rules into the next higher level class? What's that like, trying to get that done?
So from my standpoint, and let's go back to early LS Fest and figure out, what early NMCA, as the Chevy Performance Series started building, and Scoggins Dickey's involvement, Summit's involvement. The one thing to start out with is what classes can draw the masses. Where is the drop box to be able to put this group of cars, and we're not talking about 4 or 5 cars, we're talking about potentially 200 cars or 100 cars. How can we fit them in here? So early on, we come up with the personal index type stuff, where Rumble was a slower version of the next class forward called Street King. Those names have not changed. We use those names from day one, and they've been very consistent. So Rumble allows you to run a car from 11.0 to 14.0. Originally, it was half-second indexes. Now it's quarter-second indexes. But pick where your car fits the best. So it's still a little bit handicap format. You don't have to have 11-second car to win the class. 14-second car can get it done. Street King allowed trans brake. It allowed other things that weren't allowed in Rumble, just a faster version. So it goes from like 11.0 all the way as quick as 8 flat. And so really, when you're building classes, you build it for the progression of the participant. Participant starts at 14.0, wants to go faster, works on his car, finally he's going 11s, wants to put a trans brake, new transmission, finally drag radial tire, now he's going low 9s with a bar in the car, and finally that progresses him quite possibly to look at the ability to run heads-up classes. Heads-up classes is whenever the slope gets very slippery and you have to really tighten the reins on it and make it where they can't ski through the trees. So nonetheless, when you get to heads-up classes, that is where the reins really start to tighten up about what you can and can't do. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that the old saying, ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
That goes, there's a lot of people over the early years went that direction. I built a car, now I want to see where it fits.
Right.
Well, sometimes the only place I've got for you is in drag radial. And if you're not going 440s, that's probably a problem spot. So
right.
that was the end all be all drop box, was to toss you into drag radial whenever you wouldn't fit anything else. But then as times evolved, the best thing, and I get pounded for this sometimes because technology outruns the rule set quicker than we can write the word sometimes.
Right.
So that's where you see mid-season adjustments or even Monday morning quarterback on some rule sets in some have-to cases. There's a much different rule set written for a one-day race as there is for a season championship series. Season championships taking into account all the racetracks you're going to go to, all the weather that these combinations are going to run in. And at the end of the year, if you provided the opportunity for somebody to fairly chase a championship, then you did a good job. A
Right.
one-day race may have a whole different set of rules than a season championship race. But nonetheless, it's a slippery slope. It's very difficult. It takes a lot of knowledge. It takes a lot of phone calls. It takes a lot of guys on the outside, racers that are willing to share data and really tell you that, they can go 480 when all they've shown is 512. And and then steps in the knowledge from the past to be able to just go look at their data, go look at their race back data, and you can tell me 512 all day, but right here I see that this thing can easily go 480. So,
Right.
no, go ahead, John.
So I think it just Lonnie's saying a lot of cool stuff here, and things are popping in my head of examples of all that stuff. But I think one thing I want to point out is, why do people modify anything, right? I mean, they do this because they want to go faster than stock, and they also want to. I mean, let's be honest. We all have that moment where we're at a stoplight, right? And we're in our whatever vehicle we're in, and we look over, and there's somebody else that's kind of interesting, and they've quietly navigated through traffic to grab the light with me, and I'm sitting there going, okay, does he realize that this isn't just a fifth gen with a cold air intake, that it runs tens on motor? Great, let's see what this Mustang with the Kenny Bell can do. And we go, and then I get pulled over because there was a police car behind me. This actually happened, but we have fun. So I think the whole thing of like, why do people keep coming back to modifying cars? And I think it's like a mix of just wanting to go faster, wanting to compete, having those stoplight drag wars. I mean, I think we all have those stories in the past of street racing with people that you knew or you didn't know, or you ran for money. So it's always out there, man. Back when I was a kid, I had my parents' 68 Le Mans with a 352 barrel Power Glide. I blew the whole thing up, and I raced a guy in a Laguna S3, if you guys remember what that is, for like 3 miles. And I won, but I blew a head gasket. So I'm not sure if I really won, anyway. But I think just in general, that's why people do this. And I remember like when Lonnie and I connected from the NMCA series, I think he's kind of touched on something, and he's very nicely describing kind of a complicated process, because for Lonnie and the NMCA folks, and then myself kind of as a kind of a participant, and Brian, you as well for LS Fest and everything else, there's like this idea of a class structure, but then like Lonnie said, that the cat's been out of the bag for years. How do you get this nitrous guy in Maryland to make a couple changes to fit a class, because Lonnie knows that Ken's setup is going to run away from everybody else, right? So how do you get Ken to step down the jets and the nitrous fogger, or how do you get somebody else to change the tire or change some of the suspension to run a class? And at some point, somebody goes from just being a person who just shows up at the track and makes hits to somebody who says, I actually want to compete with some rules, and I want to show people that I can do it. With equal rules. And I find people would race for that reason, just that, can I beat you guys if I do this? And so that really engaged a lot of people. Not very few people would say they really race for the money. I think it's very facetious. They race for the competition. Nobody actually wants to show up and destroy everybody. Because what happens is at the second race, as Lonnie knows, nobody shows up because that guy ran a second faster than everybody else. That's just no fun. So deep down, everybody has that competitive vibe.
You're bringing up a couple really good points. My alma mater, School of Automotive Machinists, which is now known as Samtech, the guy who owns the place, Judson Massengill, who's one of the early adopters of LS, he said a couple things. One of the things he said to the students in class, he says, if I were to hand you Greg Anderson's Pro Stock car, and you could own it, the gas tank is always going to be full, you're going to turn the key and it's always going to run, you never have to lash the valve, it's the magical race car, would you want that car, or would you rather have a car that you could start and it's going to break, it's going to do whatever, but you're allowed to modify it? I can give you Greg's car, you're never allowed to modify a thing, but it's a magic race car. Or do I want to give you a car that you could actually build on and try to go faster. And it was weird to me, the number of people that really just wanted to hop in Greg's car and they never felt any need to try to go faster at all. They just wanted to go fast. And then there were others of us that are just like, that would just kill us, to never be able to mod our cars and to try to go a little bit faster. So that's one interesting aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, I think. I mean, there's some people who want turnkey performance, right? They don't want to mess with it. They don't. I have a pet theory. I don't think. Well, Lonnie, what do you think about this? I think some people really like building cars, and I think some people like racing cars. But sometimes people are a little stronger in one versus the other. I think a Stevie Fast. I think he wants to race and win. I don't know that he's necessarily getting a lot of joy from sitting there, torquing down head studs and things like that.
Right.
But he seems like he's always like just lit up when he's racing. So
No, that's true. Stevie's a good example. He very knowledgeable guy, can work on anything from front to rear of the car, and does a very fair share of what has to be done to whether it's his small tire car or his pro mod car. But yeah, I mean, he is one that when he puts a helmet on, that's a different guy. Ricky Smith is a guy that although a little grumpy sometimes, he is a guy that very knowledgeable, loves the working side of the car to make it happen from front to back. And I still think that he very much enjoys putting on a helmet, but I know he enjoys working on the cars. And he's done it for a very long time. At some point, it's the passion that continues to drive. It's the passion that continues to drive the aftermarket. And so there's a smaller group, I think, and the major manufacturers are not helping the smaller group. The major manufacturers are providing a lot of horsepower straight off the showroom. Heck, you can go buy a new Z71 Chevy pickup. It's 475 horsepower. Yep. And diesel trucks make 900 worth of torque. Yep. And whether you buy a fifth gen, a new Z28, a new Corvette, any of the higher end, high performance LS platforms, there's a group of people that are going to leave the parking lot, and once this thing's broke in or they get a little, they're comfortable with that power, then they'll see what it is. And it takes them a little while to ever get comfortable with the power that you're driving off the car lot right now. So the aftermarket doesn't help the group that wants it to be better. But I still think that on our side, the passion for the group that I'm involved with, good is never good enough.
Yeah.
And that's what drives the aftermarket.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I think personally myself, it's I like going to the strip and running, I guess, as much as anybody, but I don't find myself going back unless I make a change to the car. It's like I always run and then I'm unhappy because it didn't run what I thought, or maybe I found something that, man, if I had just done this, I would run a little bit faster. So I might not go back, for another 3 or 4 months until I make some changes. And so I think I probably, maybe, and I'm not a very good builder, but maybe I fit more into that, the experimentalist, the type of person that makes a change and then I want to see what it does and, try to make incremental changes towards going faster. And then that brings me back, John, to something you said about rule set and the people that like the rules. I guess I'd probably find myself in that area too, where it's like, well, if we're not all held accountable to the same set of rules and another guy makes 50 horsepower, another 2,000 horsepower, what does it really matter and how's that applicable? And that also takes me back to something else that Judd said with a lot of his customers. We'd always wonder why some of the customers that he had, that was paying the school for race engines would settle into a class that we felt maybe was a little bit below them. In terms of how much money they had or how much talent and whatever. And he goes, you never want to be a racer in a class where you don't have every dollar necessary to spend for every single part that's allowed in that class. The smart people will be the ones where they will have their budget, their account set, for every part that's legal within a certain class, and that's what makes them successful. They're never strung out. If they have a failure, they can afford to put another engine in it. And so that's an interesting thing about racers as well. And I guess you probably learn this, growing up. You at first you're just trying to go as fast as you can, and you have a lot of things that blow up, and then at a certain point you're just like, now I want to be consistent and run consistently. So I don't know. It's just something else I think about once in a while.
You know what's really interesting is if people are tuned in, they could be anywhere in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they could have grown up with a completely different perspective on what is normal or attainable. Because, as somebody like myself who remembers making 500 wheel horsepower NA was pretty hard back in the day, and people spent a lot of money to get there. You could do that with like you said, a sloppy mechanics junkyard LY6 with 823 rectangle port heads, Holly Terminator, and a truck intake, or a Holly High Ram. You could make 500 wheel, and you can daily drive that. I mean, Lonnie, gosh, or Brian, you as well, because you're younger, but you're not that much younger.
48.
Actually, you are probably 10 years younger, but like 1993. I mean, who made 500 wheel and drove it daily? Well, yeah, if you had like a 540 big block that was tuned for pump gas, right? But that's not like normal. Nowadays, somebody could be rolling around in like an S10 with a 500 wheel build that they have $5,000 into. And it's just a completely different world. That's why I think it's so crazy with like the swaps that people do. The things that people show up to with races, and the whole world isn't just drag racing, obviously, but like just what people are doing. I mean, you guys, Brian, you have a C5. I know that makes huge power. I mean, for people to make 500, 600, 700 wheel NA or turbo or whatever, and then have the reliability we have right now, it's just insane.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I think about what the aftermarket has done in the last 20 years to. In response, to people wanting to go faster. And what I think is funny is how much money we used to spend on things like, rods and pistons and forged cranks and aftermarket blocks, only to run a turbo that nowadays would be considered absolute garbage. And we thought we needed all of these parts to make 750 horsepower to the wheels, and we were awed by running, 930s and 940s. And then there's this the internet thing that happens, this forum things that happens, this Matt Happel's sloppy mechanic things that happens with stock bottom end cars. And there's this like, oh no, we're going to push these parts, factory blocks, factory rods, factory pistons. We're going to go ahead and take this engine apart and gap the rings, which I would have never considered that, as being like, am I going to take an entire engine apart, gap rings, and throw it back together again and go run it? I would have just naturally wanted to spend $900 on rods and pistons, maybe even a few years back. But there are a ton of people doing this, and it's really fun to watch. This younger group of guys that are enabled by systems like the Holly Terminator, which, the three of us, we've all made some tuning errors, here and there. The technology was not what it was, and the systems these days do a lot of thinking for us. They really have a lot of, I'm not going to use the word band-aids, but a lot of safeties to keep us from blowing things up and allowing us to go faster. We talk about it every week or two here at Summit Racing, where we want to guide you into the right part so you don't have a catastrophic blow up that takes you off the track for the next 4 years, which personally happened to me. It's like, no, we have this pathway, and this is going to fail next, and you can keep yourself here, but eventually you're going to need this, and if you want to go faster. But I really, really like, the advances in technologies and how the racers always push these things. It's kind of this race, and it's also the good manufacturers, listening, and we ourselves at Summit, listening to the customers, what do they need to go faster? What's the limit right now? Is something too expensive? Is this something where it didn't make sense to make a part 2 years ago, but now it kind of does because there's enough people that want it, and we can do it in mass, and we can lower, the cost to manufacture these things down. So that is something where it's racing for me and a lot of people in the aftermarket parts industry. Is I'm actually racing against factories, that are building this stuff. And we talked about it a few weeks ago in terms of showing up to PRI and SEMA and springing these brand new parts on, all of our competitors. And then we all have to go back to the drawing board, once these parts are coming out, and, racers come back and forth. But when I was building pro stock pistons, it was really cool because some guy would call me up, really famous engine builder, and he goes, well, I heard you guys can make pistons. And it's like, yeah, we're doing pretty good at making pistons right now. And then we were hot for a minute until we weren't, until we got complacent. And then they would go on to the next manufacturer. And a lot of the really good racers would have a couple suppliers, so that they never got stuck in a jam if one person couldn't supply. But it's a lot of fun as a manufacturer, to supply parts, because we're racing against each other as well. So in this industry, there's a lot of different ways to race, I guess.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. And used to, we had a saying that all three of us have used, that good parts are not cheap. Well, now technology, manufacturing processes, companies like yourself with Summit, now that wording in the aftermarket world of LS are good parts are affordable. And then now, so a good part will get you to 1,000 plus horsepower. It's now we start talking about 1,500, 2,000 horsepower before you got to buy the expensive extreme part that'll hold up in that environment. So now a great concept to think of is good parts are affordable.
Yeah. Factory blocks taking us out to 1,300 horsepower to the wheels, 13, 14, 15. And now we used to think we needed, a Dart 6-volt block, and then that kind of went away. And now it's coming right back up again. And Lonnie, you're dealing with cars out there, that are capable of making 1,600, 1,700 horsepower with very inexpensive parts, and kind of questionable, whether the cars are built to, what you're demanding in terms of what they're capable of for speed if they really turn it up. I mean, what's that like, to try to rein these guys in a little bit and help them, build?
Yeah, so it is. That's another. Sometimes, so one of the things that technology has allowed, whether you go back to an old school 565, 540, 522, 632. We talk about definitely in this podcast where we're visiting on the LS platform. So you can truly, a lot of times you don't need any machine work done. You can buy some pieces that you need, do some measurements on your engine, make sure that it is a stable platform for what you have for a block to work with. You can put these parts in your garage. And when you fire this thing back up, it greatly exceeds that 500 wheel that John was talking about. We're talking about, just in your garage and rolled it out, and that thing is 675, 700 at the wheel.
Yeah.
Power adder combinations that are easily available, whether it be centrifugal or turbo stuff. And the kits are really well designed and easy to install for the do-it-yourselfer guy. You don't have to be ASA mechanic to be able to work on the stuff these days with the design and the processes that go on to be able to, for the parts for you to bolt in it. And so again, one of the things that's happened is technology sometimes outruns the rule book. And so parts come along that are easily bolted on. They make a lot of power very quickly. And all of a sudden, sometimes we have to protect the racer or the client or the participant. We have to protect them from themselves. And some of them know the potential of what they got, and some are still trying to figure it out. And it's in that figure out process that I got to keep them safe.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome. Hey, Katie flashed a couple pictures up there, and John, a lot of these are ones that you sent us. Lonnie, you sent us one that I thought was really cool because it really kind of provides a scope for a lot of our fans and customers here to see what it takes to actually run an event like LS Fest. Katie, do you have that overhead photo, like the aerial photo of the layout down there in Bowling Green? Maybe she doesn't.
Yeah, so
all right.
the event planning right there.
Exactly. And there's so much that goes into this stuff. And I think about the professionals like yourselves and the promoters, that, I mean, the sheer number, thousands of spectators. I don't know what the car, John, I guess you would know. I mean, what was the car count over there, say 2019 at LS Fest, for instance?
I think Lonnie's got the numbers too, but drag racing was close to 700 cars, right? The show
676.
676.
Wow.
What was the show the car show scene? 1700?
1540, 1550, we'll call it 1550 for the entire, if as a signed up participant
Right.
of LS Fest 2019. This aerial photo was provided, and I'm very, very proud of these photos. Dallas Jones, who owned enormous. That was the year we rented, and we do every year now, but we rented the amusement park. So the parking lot you see in the left third of that photo is the amusement park parking lot, which would normally be it's open, riding roller coasters and water park. That's LS Fest. We rented the whole thing to be able to park spectators, and in no event prior to this one had Beach Bend Raceway Park parked that many fields for one event. We've started having phone calls now for 2021 planning, and we're already making some substantial changes to be able to accommodate even more than what we see right here.
Mm-hmm.
We know on the racer side of things, we have finally settled in and found a number for racers that enable us to give them a good experience. 676 for some, great experience. For others, I stopped and got a biscuit. Took me 3 hours to get in the gate. Not a great experience. So we finally have found a number of racers to cap that number at, and be able to provide a great experience for all of them. Beach Bend Road coming into the facility now is 3 lanes wide. The city did that for us for the 2020 event, and we've got great traffic plans. We're able to now, with the traffic planning and stuff going forward of each event, and sometimes problems promote fixes. And so that's what we do with LS Fest, is everything whenever the wheels fall off and you figure out how to make it work, then you actually make a new plan and fix it for next year to provide the greatest experience possible.
I went with the team this year, and even with COVID, I was just amazed at how smooth it went. I mean, you would have thought that this year would have been a ghost town, and it was actually pretty hopping. Very glad I went, and really looking forward to this next year, going with our summit team over there. You actually bring something up, pretty interesting about that magic number of racers, because John and I, when we were having our brain dump on, classes, we talked a little bit about series kind of coming and going, but there's also classes that are really hot, and then they're not, for whatever reason. It hits kind of a pinnacle, and then maybe a few people dominate and people go away. So we've been talking about the sheer number of performance trucks that are being modified right now. A lot of people are blown away by this, and I think about performancetrucks.net. I think about sloppy mechanics, but these things are the new hot rods. I may not be able to go buy a 4th gen Camaro if I've got a new little baby and I'm working, the wife's working, and that may not be so cool for me to make that as a family purchase. But what I can go buy is a $3,500 work truck. It's got a 5.3 liter iron block in there with some nice heads on it. And one thing needs to less, you've got a huge engine bay that fits turbos. You can run factory cast iron manifolds in some respects, and these kits have cropped up that are inexpensive. And And now everybody's making 650, 800 wheel horsepower, with trucks and going fast with trucks. And, so John was remarking that, I think trucks are going to be big for 2021. And where do we see that going?
For me, the LS Fest West, which is so there's 2 LS Fest events a year currently. We would like for there to be more, but right now there are 2 LS Fest events. One is Vegas, we call it LS Fest West, and then LS Fest, or as our meetings refer to it as East, but there's the main LS Fest that happens in Bowling Green. The West Coast has a truck SUV class and has since we started the LS Fest out there. And LS Fest Bowling Green 2021 will see the induction of a truck SUV only class. We haven't 100% come up with the rule set yet. Again, you've got a group of people within trucks now that are a little bit all over the map, meaning that there's 400 wheel to 900 wheel to even more. And so we're just going to provide a really nice platform, probably utilize a very similar set of rules that's worked on the West Coast. And so you'll see a truck SUV for 2021 at Bowling Green. And just like classes you were talking about, who they kind of build themselves to a pinnacle and then they go away a little bit. John was very involved in one, if not both, of the classes that I'm fixing to mention. And one was Real Street, which is really a Ultra 275, and then Drag Radial, which was really the pinnacle of LS. And so what happens there is technology does not help us in those rule sets. That goes back to where I say technology outruns the rule set sometimes to maintain that level. So either guys lose interest because you won't advance the rule set to let the class go faster because there's new technology. And so if you stay consistent, there's going to be a certain number of guys that are happy with, I don't have to go buy the new turbo. I don't have to go buy the new Pro Charger or any centrifugal Vortec as well. And so, or from our position, it's a heads up class. Heads up racing has never been cheap. It will never be cheap. There are heads up classes that are affordable to race, but there's always that guy that you spoke of earlier that he needs to be in Pro Mod or Drag Radial or something, and he's just having fun down here in this little street class. His checkbook allows him to do at a very high level, but he just loves the street class format. And we like him there. It's just, that guy wants everybody else to go faster, and everybody else is the one that I have to worry about. So again, please the masses, work through the problems, and heads up racing it's very difficult to say that heads up racing, whatever class it may be, is very timeless, because it is a slippery slope with technology moves forward. As a racer, I always wanted to go faster. I always had, from a 522, which was a mountain motor in 1990, whatever, to 572 to 632 to 706, and 822 stuff that I didn't know if the door was wide enough on the trailer to get the motor, on a Hemi-headed 822 Sonny's deal, even get it through. Is it going to fit in the car? So we all want to progress as racers to a better ET, to a better car, and with that, it becomes a little bit of a slippery slope on my side with the rules to be able to maintain the masses to move forward with that progression.
All right. So you bring up some great points. John, we're going to show off some of the pictures you sent here about the history of stuff, but go ahead with the point you're about ready to make. And Katie, if you want to cue up some of those pictures that he sent over earlier.
Now this is starting to feel like the old timer reel, right? This is how Grumpy Jenkins felt in the 80s. Grumpy, tell us about the 68 NHRA Winter Nationals. So this was a car that we put together back in 2007 to be on the show
yeah.
Pinks. If Brian, do you remember that? So we put this together. This picture of Lonnie is at Memphis, 2007 Memphis. So we put the car together for the show. We showed up for the filming. Another story for another time. That situation was just a nightmare. Anyway, we built this car for 15 grand, and it ran 10s on motor with budget parts, and ran high 9s on 150 shot. So it was a lot of fun. It's a car I bought for 8 grand, and after I parted it out, I had 5 into it. So
nice. I'm looking at the stickers on the car, and that really,
it's a little right down memory lane.
Dated. Katie, what else do we have?
Oh, this is just a very selfish thing of me. This was us at the Johnny Hunkins GM High Tech race in 2000. So that's what drove the car to the race in 2000, 20 years ago. The Chicago caravan of 20 odd cars meets Houston, meets Baton Rouge, Louisiana guys like Steve Coffey and Tim Creswell. So that was my 98 Formula. So as drove to the track. So on skinnies. So good times.
Nice. So as Katie's bringing up more of these car pictures, I'm looking at that. I'm thinking about how integral the magazines were to us growing up, prior to most of them being pulled off the shelves here a couple of years back, which was a travesty. Kind of is a terrible thing, that the magazines are no longer there, because I grew up learning a lot. I was in an area that maybe didn't have a lot of money to go build really amazing stuff, and those magazines showed up, and I learned a lot from those magazines. And good memories from that. GM High Tech. Some of the most cool photos of my car in racing are from GM High Tech. I love that magazine, and specifically LS and LT. What that magazine brought. Do you want to bring up about that G body there?
That was Robert Strong. So turned into a great friend. They live down in North Florida. He is in the Kaiser air compressor business.
Okay.
He's a guy that started with built a little, we'll call it a little LS, and started with this car really as a street car. It moved into more of a track car, put it on the trailer, take it to the racetrack, to finally really, as you see it pictured there, and it's gone one step further since then. But that is I think they make, John may remember the number. I think that thing makes right at almost 1,100 horsepower, dry sump. It's 400 and remember if it's 460 inches now, 460 some inches. But yeah, I mean, that thing is extreme from one end to the other. It's got from billet pistons to as nice a rod combination as you can buy, tool steel camshaft stuff. That thing is, they weren't building it to turn it 10,000, but they turn it up there, and it ain't a long ways from it. So now they run that car on 235s, and so you see him run a lot of 235s. He runs a lot of Ultra. That car was one of our long-standing NA real street cars. Never had a power adder on it. Has never had a nitrous bottle on it, and has always kind of stayed that course. And what a great family! What a great guys! Wife raced our True Street and Rumble. They would always have me a little sausage biscuit in the mornings. That was their deal at the racetrack. Cook a little sausage biscuit, and at my size, I never really turned away from a sausage biscuit. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, so again, a racer that became a great friend and really part of the LS family from its beginning.
All right.
Yeah, this is Carlton Thompson's car, and this is one of 5 cars that I know of, Lonnie, that have gone 3s in the 8th.
That's
with
right.
an LS power plant.
Yep.
And Carlton is one of the 2 people to have done it this year, and with a single 118. And that's kind of a big deal, right? So in drag racing, going threes, 390s, for example, in the 8th mile, that's a huge achievement. I think the first time somebody went threes in the 8th mile was Keith Berry. And
Yep.
Lonnie, would that have been
2010, 2011?
That's 2010 with the Corvette. And yeah, I mean, again, Keith, long-standing supporter of LS in its original inception, stayed with the LS platform for a very long time. The car eventually turned itself into Radio Wars, Radio versus the World car. Had a lot of success there. Had a great team with him and behind him, and really put the. He wasn't the only guy, but he was a very big name guy that put LS on the map at that level. And so again, kudos to Keith Berry and what he did back in the day with that program. And again, we see guys that have continued forward, even doing more with less, meaning that it may have a smaller tire than RVW had. And those guys are. Me and John got to see, as well as a lot of people that's paid attention to the LS world, we've all got to see a lot of milestones, especially drag radio promoted, and even street cars, True Street, Real Street. Real Street was a real race car, and then drag radio was the pinnacle of it for the time. And we got to see so many new pinnacles reached and new personal bests, and this car here is tough to look at. We lost Clay to cancer here just 5 weeks ago, and this was a guy that I met through some phone conversations and then drag week. And over the years, we became great friends. Arizona was home for him in his late life. About a year ago, him and his wife moved over to the Tennessee River. And so he was a little closer to where I'm at, but we always stayed in touch. Couldn't ask for a nicer guy. And he built 2 Mustangs.
Thing 1 and 2.
1 and 2, and Clay was that was a great fella. Heaven gained a great angel there, but again, here was a car that started doing some things. This is when swaps, and he didn't care what somebody said. It didn't have a Coyote, it didn't have a 302, it wasn't a Boss 289.
Right.
That dude was a LS, and so it was really unique to see Clay do that and have the success he did. Drag Week is another platform that I'm greatly involved with and am the director for. And Keith Turk helps with all the technical side of that, with all the rules side. And so between Keith and I, we've again gained some great friendships and great memories out of Drag Week. And Clay was one of those.
Yeah, I got to know him from doing an engine internals, and you remember his voice on the phone. I mean, it's one of those customers where you just, you might not talk to somebody for a year and a half or 2 years, and then that voice comes up on the phone, and you just instantly know who it is, and you don't even have to catch up. It's just like, it's just like talking to him yesterday. But great dude, and will be missed. And Keith Berry, you guys brought me back there a little bit, but talking with him, because that was the year that I actually managed Grand Champion there at LS Fest. And so I had my black C5Z and he had his black C5Z. And part of that competition was drag racing. I had to go make some passes. And so Keith walks over to my car, and I've got a little tiny fire extinguisher in my car, kind of held in with a zip tie to the seat mover, extender, adjuster, or whatever, just for the rules, right? And he just shakes his head and everything like that. I'm like, okay, dude. I realize you're Mr. Fast Guy, but this is all I need for this.
Leave me alone, Keith Berry.
It was funny. So he's standing next to me, kind of in the awards because we're handing him the awards, and then I got my little thing as well. I'm like, so Keith, a pretty good day for black C5Zs, right? And he's just like that. It's just like, okay, yeah, thanks, Keith. Just I love a lot of the personalities that we have here in racing, and just great stuff. Katie, do we have any other photos here that we got, that John sent over?
I've got other pictures too. If we do this again sometime, I've got some really great pictures.
There you
go. Lonnie, do you know Brian Black?
Oh yes, Brian, good dude, great dude. Has a great business with RaceWire.
Yep.
Has again been involved with the LS program since very early on. We've seen that car, specifically that car. We've seen it make transformations from where it started to where it's at now. Again, I can't say enough about all the support that Brian's given over the years, and great dude. And glad to see that his business is very successful.
Yeah, good parts.
Just a quick add on Brian. So Brian started as an LT guy. So back in 2003, when we had the LS1 Tech series, and we had a track event at US 41 in Morocco, Brian showed up with his LT car. It was another Trans Am or Firebird or Formula, but he was out there. He was also lighting me up on the rules and stuff because he didn't like some of the rules. So he's kind of walking over and just, 6'5" guy and has lots of opinions. And I was like, Brian, these rules have been out here for 6 months. I mean, you can't do this today. Go to your car. We're done. But Brian is an example of one of those folks who stayed with the LS platform for 17 years.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing's been nitrous. It's been supercharger, now turbo. It's X275 legal. So, when you follow like modern drag racing, here's a car that's just gorgeous, very high build quality, and out there competing in 275 against the guys like Ron Rhodes and all these other guys that run small blocks and big blocks. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
Still an argumentative guy once in a while, though, when it comes to rules.
Nah.
You've never hung out with Brian.
I know that we've got a few other photos. Okay, go ahead on this one.
I crewed for Anthony Manna for a bunch of years in LS Drag Radial, and so here's a picture of us with Steve Harmon on the left, the crew. Anthony's the guy I'm jumping behind, and there's Kim from Aerospace. But we had a lot of fun racing that series. Again, not easy for Lonnie and the guys to keep that class evolving and fun. So we did our best to compete, and Anthony in the first half of that class was honestly, he was class filler. Before I was crewing for him, he was still trying to figure out some other things, and then he got some things figured out, and I was part of the second half of the racing program, if you will. And it was anybody's race, right, Lonnie? I mean, the first couple of years, you really couldn't predict who was going to win.
No, that's exactly right. You had Mark Carlisle, which came to race at a high level with a very nice car, and he was really the pinnacle of the class for a while, and everybody chased whatever Mark was doing. And then we saw guys that like Anthony, like Andy Esri, Joe Dodonna. There was a ton of guys that hopped in and started moving their programs in the direction that it needed to, and real quickly it got to where there was I wouldn't have bet on any of them, and we could have sold a Calcutta for all of them because anybody could win on race day.
That's cool. One of the cool things for our customers.
Lonnie digging into us about that. What do you call it? That front valence thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, Lonnie.
Gotcha. All right. What are we looking at?
Brian, you know what kind of car this is?
Like how these engines have been just showing up everywhere.
Yeah. So a little little Bantam Roadster.
Yeah.
And that's where we start to, and we see those in a lot of, whether it be SFG's $1 million or the folks million, big money bracket race stuff from $5,000 to $50,000 or whatever. We're starting to see a lot more LS platforms in both Pro No E, Super Pro, whether it be dragster door car. So it has taken, the older group, which would, the decade of being a kid working on lawnmowers and a 327 Chevy, that was wow. That was so, a 365 horse 327 was wow. And that's where I came from. And so, and then older than me, definitely the 283 and 327, 350 stuff, that group of people, it has taken them a while to realize that the LS stuff, there's not a water pump in your shop that fits. There's not a starter that's back in the barn that fits. There's not an intake that fits. And so it's taken a little while for the older group to latch on to the LS swap stuff or performance LS. But the millennial group, they've started in a great place because that platform, again, we've talked about it here. It's a great platform to be involved with. If you just want to change a few bolts and a little bit of hardware, or you want to give it a full facelift and a full recondition and go all out with some new power adder technology, the LS platform is taking off leaps and bounds, and we see a transplant here into a little Bantam altered. This thing probably quarter mile. The way this thing sets is probably a 740 car,
Right.
and I'm just guessing by
Brian, what's your guess?
See, so
Okay, Brian, what's your guess on what Shane ran?
I couldn't even fathom what this thing did.
725.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And this is a little shout out to our Australian friends. What? This is there's I think one of the things we've been talking about is America drag racing and performance, but the scene is big in everywhere: Sweden, Middle East, Australia, and Shane's rocking this car in Australia. The Australian scene's very, very, very big. And actually, an earlier car that we looked at, which was that Utes. That was Steve Petrovsky's big tire Ute. That's been 690, something like that. 690.
So for our fans here at Summit watching our live stream today, John Ryan has really taken it upon himself to basically be the guy that has put together the fast lists. And not only does he does it here in the United States, and he's been doing this job for 15 years of keeping track of people that sometimes they don't really want to be tracked of in terms of how fast they're going, but he's on it. He knows how fast they're going. He knows who they're beating. And because these LS things are ending up all over the world, he's tracking down some of these cars that are built here. They go really fast. They show up, and then a sheik wants to buy it, and that's cool. And they ship it over there, and then they go really fast with it over there and spend even more money and go even faster. So this thing is worldwide right now. And all of us owe you, John, for, doing a great job of, keeping track of this movement of ours. And we'll move on to some other pictures and things here, but I think that's really cool. The efforts that you've made over the years to, document, this whole thing.
I think people always just want to pick off the guy who's faster. There's that kind of grudgy, I want to beat him, kind of thing. And it just keeps going years on years, doesn't matter if you're like, if it was 30 years ago or 5 years ago or tomorrow. We like to be the first to cross the stripe.
Katie's going to go ahead and pull up some more pictures, and I'm going to go through some of the comments here real quick. And it's not real quick. I mean, we've been talking here for a while, and it's awesome. So I know you guys are going to recognize some of these names. And Tony McGinnis wanted us to talk about our Lord and Savior, the Coyote 5.0. We'll get to the Ute here in just a second. But, for all of our fans out there, yeah, we're going to talk about Coyote, we're going to talk about Heavy and all that stuff, but today we happen to be talking LS. Can't help it. Let's see, we've got Toot over here from Columbus, Dave Schull, one of our guys here at Summit Racing. Fritzl Garage, nitrous is the best power adder. I don't know where Fritzl is from. And then let's see, we've got John McCoggan over in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We got Fritzl's Garage is over in Warsaw, Poland. And then we've got, let's see who we got here. I love some of the live commentary because they've actually commented as we kind of keep on going on here.
The thing about the folks in Europe I've noticed is that it's not real easy for folks to LS their first gen Camaro or their swap. Parts are a lot harder to come by, a lot more expensive, and there's not as much tuning support. So I know it's a lot harder for people in Poland and Romania and places like that to figure this stuff out. So we got to help them.
You brought up a really good point. With this technology, though, I've got a number of friends of mine that are doing, remote tuning now, and I would have never really. It was hard enough getting people on chassis dynos. We come from an era of people messing with air blades at the end of the quarter mile and looking for parachute dust on spark plugs, and that's how they tune. And then people that Chinese or the chassis dynos became more available, and people were able to look at their curve, and they were tuning with HP tuners, and a lot of that's moved into Holley these days. And now we're getting into the fact that with the data logging, that the Holleys can do, and cylinder by cylinder, et cetera, wideband O2s, that they can do a very nice job with remote tuning. So you can be anywhere in the world, and if you find the right guy, here in the States or wherever it is, that helps you set up the recipe with the injectors he knows works, with this cam, with this head, with this turbo. It's really important to listen to these guys because they know what works. And when they're tuning these combinations, having a set of unknown injectors off of eBay, no bueno. It's very hard to tune around some of this stuff that's out there. I'm not saying it doesn't flow where it flows, but it's very hard for a tuner. So if you are from Europe or in a place where it is hard to find tuning, for these engines, there are some things that Summit can do. And also on these forums and these user groups where you'll find people that are able to help you, tune the car, get it running the way that it should. So, life is good.
Lonnie knows a lot of good tuners, huh? Patrick Barnhill. Nothing like being at an event and seeing Patrick walk around with like $80 bedazzled jeans, tuning a car.
So that and that list has grown large and wide. There is I say that there's a lot of good tuners out there. There's a whole lot more people that think that they're tuners, and so I don't say take your stuff to just anybody and turn them loose and let them tear it up. The one thing about and we touched on it earlier in this podcast, that the technology now, whether it be Terminator X, and there's other units available, but most familiar with the Holley stuff, is that it has a lot of safeguards in it where you can become a great tuner with the support that Holley offers within the box that you bolted in your car in the first place. If you'll just follow the help sections, maybe make a few calls into their technical support, you can become a good tuner on your own product. Don't be scared of it. The laptop's not going to blow up. The keys aren't going to go to smoking. And and if your parameters are set right, you really can't tear it up yourself. You can find a lot of ways to not improve your product,
right?
But you can find, if you just work at it, you can find ways to improve your own tune-up. But yes, there's a huge list. There's great tuners all over the country. There's guys that have bought dynos and chassis dynos and that kind of stuff that they're learning as they go, and that's really what it takes. If you're going to hit the ball well in Major League Baseball, you got to swing a lot of bats, and it's no different in tuning. You just stay safe, and from a customer base, if the client or the customer will also have the knowledge is out there, whether it be in the forums, in the instructional manual that you receive with your Terminator X or your EFI system. If you'll just read and learn a little bit about it yourself, you'll feel a lot more comfortable about what somebody's fixing to open a laptop and do, and you'll understand it. And there's guys that, it was said really well here on Horsepower Wars recently. One of our teams said, "I'm not a tuner, but what may take a great tuner 20 minutes, I'll figure it out in 3 hours."
Right.
So that's just it. Don't. Some of it's not going to come real fast, but it will come easy. And so
you gotta jump into it, just like the time you did with that English wheel for the first time, and you wanted to learn how to do something. You got to do something, and you're going to crack a few eggs. And I remember, one of the photos that we had here earlier was Mike Brown, Ohio boys, and how fast those guys were going, and talking with guys like Kurt Urban, for the 427, on the forum, and talking about. Yeah, well, we're making 1,800 horsepower, but we're only able to lay that down at the last little bit of the track. And so, watching these guys, with boost strategy and figuring out what it takes to launch the car and, ramp in power over time and over speed. I mean, that's tremendously exciting, and just on we go. So
Can I just say,
I guess
I'm so glad just really quickly, I'm so glad you brought up Kurt Urban. I've known Kurt for 21 years. You couldn't just find a greater guy in life and just in the scene. He is just a great guy for all the things that he's done over the years, the wheel to wheel and the killer builds, the partnering that he had done with GM to build concept vehicles and things. And that guy is still as grounded as it gets. And I saw him at LS Fest this year, and we hung out, and man, he's just a great guy. And he is willing to share information and help you go fast reliably. Yeah. I mean, we're very blessed to have Kurt kicking around and being able to interact with that guy, because he's just such good people.
There's a few guys
way better than Lonnie. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that there are a few, not just a few. There's actually a lot of guys, and it's really good, that people are willing to share their knowledge. We were talking about it with a racer here a few years back, where really great racers are very gracious with their knowledge right up until the point where you get within about 5% of their times, and then they're going to make you earn it. So it is pretty funny that way.
Did I tell you that story?
What's that?
Because you just said something that exactly relates to something that happened. So I was crewing for Andy Essery's 315 drag radial car, and when we first started showing up, just to be perfectly honest, the two of us were just kind of guessing at shock settings and boost ramps and things like that. He hadn't gone quicker than like maybe an 850 at the local track, but he had the potential to run 790 with the pack. We just didn't know how to do it. Yeah. And so at one point, the Ohio boys, more Mark Kohler than Mike Brown, started to share little crumbs with us. And so we went from like an 850 to an 820 in about 2 races. Again, they're sitting like around a 790 or a 780, and we start getting real close. And at one point, Mark Kohler just sits there and he kind of folds the laptop and says, we're good. You're getting a little too close. You got to figure out from here, okay? Michael, we agreed? These guys are cut off. And then that conversation actually happened. And they stopped, giving us advice. And they basically wanted competition, but they didn't want to see us just sit there and be door to door. They wanted us to be. They wanted the clear. They want us to be like this.
Super hard earned, and I don't blame really anybody. I mean, if you're there slaving away for hours and hours and nights, and breaking parts and the expense of those experiments that have failed, that's hard earned knowledge. And so there's no discounting that. And I don't blame anybody a bit for that. That's very hard earned and very respected to see people work at that level. And there's always going to be people, that work at that level, at Capezi's and such, that just work. It's money is a little bit of the equation, but it's just hours and hours, and it's super impressive. All right. I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff, guys. I would, if you want to jump into the comments here later after this thing, we did actually go put this out on YouTube. And so for the folks on LS1 Tech, for instance, where they weren't able to, maybe they didn't have a Facebook account or whatever, that's cool. It's going to be out there on YouTube. So we'll go in there and provide links to our YouTube video out there just so people can, get to see the tasty goodness that Lonnie and John have shared with us here today. Guys, do you have anything else that you'd like to share here before we all sign off here on this Friday?
I just I saw a little comment that guy said, "What is the most unique LS swap you guys have seen so far?" There's many, but one of the ones that I saw is the postal truck. So we've had a postal mail truck that was LS swapped and brought to LS Fest 2019, and what a very cool product. And we've seen them on everything, and starting to see LS show up in a lot of things. But the LS postal truck was a good one.
That's awesome. John, do you have a favorite?
I'm a nerd for that Mark guy from Maryland that has the 74 Rolls Royce. If you guys have seen, I can't remember his last name. He's on, there's some YouTube content on it. It's like a 1974 Rolls Royce that he bought in a boneyard. It's now Turbo LS. Before it was kind of a patina, crummy looking car, and now it looks like a show car. And so I geek out when I see that car. I probably come across a little bit like a stalker, but I really, really like that car. I just want to say a little shout out. So obviously, I'm really excited about LS Fest 2021. I'm excited with the truck stuff. I'm excited to see everybody again. Obviously, I'm hoping all this stuff kind of gets behind it in our rearview mirror. I will say, in the short term, I encourage people to watch Horsepower Wars.
Yeah.
I've been watching this season of Horsepower Wars with Team Villain Squad and the Mac guys. I'm friends with Adam and Nick and some of those other folks, and I can't wait to see how it turns out, because again, for those people who haven't watched it, all 4 entries are using LS engines, and some are SVE, some are not. Holly Terminators, well, all turbos, an S10, an 85-ish El Camino, a 4th gen Firebird, and the 4th one is what?
Mustang.
SN95.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I've been kind of watching it because Adam seems like he's been trying to play a little loose and fast with you on stuff like the torque converter and whatever. I didn't realize that you guys were so aggressive with the making sure that they stayed within budget. So it was kind of interesting to see the cheating.
Oh, well, so Adam won't call it that. That won't be the same word he uses, but nonetheless, this show we've got it's been showing on MAV TV. It's on YouTube, Horsepower Wars, and 2020. It's an awesome show. They've got 3 episodes left to get through their 10 days worth of build. It's a build a race car in 10 days for 10 grand. And teams come from everywhere to do that. Last year, the Australian team came over and won with Keith Berry and those guys on a team we called Dream Team. We had Chad Reynolds and Lyle Barnett on Team Biggin, the Aussies, and then we had a group of really nice young guys from Nebraska and the Midwest Mayhem. And so 2019 is really cool. You can go back and watch that season, and 2020 is shaping up to have a really cool finish at a very cool racetrack called Verona in Southern California. And don't run off the end of the racetrack. There is a catch net and a sand trap, but there is truck-sized boulders and about 1,000-foot drop at the end of the racetrack. So
I hope that's foreshadowing, man.
I tell you, Horsepower Wars is one of the funnest things I do. I have all the events I very much enjoy. I love the people. I love what I do within the events, whether it's the rules, the directorship, the pre-planning, all of that. I really enjoy blessed and humbled to be able to do what I do. Receive phone calls of people that ask, can you get involved with this? Can you help us with our rules? Whether it be Milan Heads Up a few years ago, we revamped some of their stuff and got them in a little bit of a new direction. And their Heads Up program is going really, really well. From Horsepower Wars to the Professional Drag Race Association, we call it the PDRA. Yeah. The NMCA guys, we still cross paths with them and work cross-reference a bunch of events together. Donald Long and his stuff with No Mercy and Lights Out and Sweet 16 and Engine Masters and Drag Week, and it's just Roadkill Nights. It's where we shut down Woodward Avenue and we race heads up there. I mean, it's just, the list is big, the list is long. I'm very humbled. 2020 has been a very eventful year. And when I say eventful, with the pandemic we've had and everything that's going on, the aftermarket has exploded because a lot of people needed something to do when they were at home. Some discretionary income was available that they weren't spending, maybe out to dinner, chasing kids to the ball fields, whatever the reason was. Yeah. The aftermarket has been very solid for 2020. We look for a lot of new customers, new people that are excited about what they're doing with their car in the garage, whether they get it out and bring it to the track, or they get it out and bring it to a car show, or just get it out and enjoy it. One of the things I want to say as we leave here is that we want to definitely value what we have, cherish what we miss, and prepare for the potential of what comes tomorrow. And all be excited about 2021 and moving forward. I want everybody to stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll all get through this together.
Amen. Amen. I'm loving it. I'll go back to Bill Lindstrom's here and a little bit back to Kurt Urban here. I want to say that green Nova, I don't know, what was it, his green Nova named? Kurt's old Kurt Urban.
Joe Nova. My friend owns it.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's got to be one of my favorite grandma cars right there with the dog dish hubcaps. You know, one of the things, I want to say thanks as well to a lot of folks, and Summit Racing does as well. We talk about all of the fans out there, who may or may not be doing LS stuff. And one of the things that we prepared here, as we always do, is where all these engines are turning up. And we came up with a really crazy list here. In terms of swaps, but I want to say thank you to everybody out there with a sand rail, guys out there in circle track, drag, street and drag truck, drift, road racing, pro touring, autocross, king of the hammers, speedboats, airboats, airplanes, and swapping into Japanese and Euro, and even the super kayak car guys out there that are adopting the LS because it just makes power. Anyway, we have customers all over the place. Thanks for tuning in today. Even if you aren't a drag racer, I think you probably got something great out of this. And John, thank you for helping put this thing together with us, and Lonnie, you as well. We look forward. We will be doing this again sometime in the future. Again, we see really good things happening for 2021. I just put my car into the garage, and it's already coming apart, so it's going to be back and better than ever. So. With that, we'll go ahead and sign off for this week, and hopefully see you again this next Friday, and we'll do something fun.